Just after midnight on March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 people quietly disappeared from the sky. No distress call, no emergency signal, no confirmed crash site. In an age when satellites track ships across oceans and smartphones can be located within meters, a massive passenger jet simply vanished. Within hours, one of the largest search operations in aviation history would begin. Governments would deploy satellites, military radar, aircraft, ships, and deep-sea submarines. But more than a decade later, the central question remains unanswered. What really happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370? The night began quietly. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was scheduled to travel from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing, China. The aircraft was a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the safest and most reliable long-haul airliners ever built. At the controls was Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a 53-year-old veteran pilot with over 18,000 hours of flying experience. Colleagues described him as calm, professional, and deeply passionate about aviation. In the right seat was First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, just 27 years old and nearing the completion of his pilot training. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Most of the passengers were Chinese nationals traveling home. Others came from countries including Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, France, and the United States. Among them were families, engineers, students, and business travelers. For everyone on board, this was supposed to be a routine overnight flight. At 12:41 a.m., MH370 lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport and climbed into the darkness over the South China Sea. Everything about the departure looked normal. The aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet and followed the planned flight path northeast toward Vietnam. Air traffic controllers communicated with the cockpit several times during the first part of the flight. Each exchange sounded calm and routine. Nothing suggested anything unusual. Then, at 1:19 a.m., air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur contacted the plane one last time before it crossed into Vietnamese airspace. The response came from the cockpit. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Those 6 words would become one of the most chilling final transmissions in aviation history. Less than 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., MH370's transponder stopped transmitting. On civilian radar screens, the aircraft simply vanished. At first, controllers assumed there had been a technical malfunction. Transponders sometimes fail, and aircraft continue flying normally while the issue is resolved. Vietnam Air Traffic Control attempted to contact the aircraft repeatedly. There was no response. Then something even stranger appeared. Military radar in Malaysia continued tracking an unidentified aircraft. The radar return appeared to show MH370 turning sharply west, back across the Malaysian peninsula. Instead of flying toward Beijing, the plane appeared to reverse course. The radar track suggested it crossed the country, passed near the island of Penang, and then continued northwest over the Strait of Malacca. This wasn't a small navigational error. It was a dramatic change of direction. Even more puzzling, the aircraft maintained altitude and speed consistent with controlled flight. Someone, or something, was still flying the plane. But air traffic controllers had no idea this was happening. To them, MH370 had simply disappeared. For several hours, confusion spread across aviation authorities in multiple countries. Controllers in Malaysia and Vietnam tried to determine exactly when the aircraft had vanished and whether another radar system might still be tracking it. Meanwhile, families in Beijing were waiting for the plane to arrive, but it never appeared. As the morning passed, Malaysia Airlines officially announced that flight MH370 had lost contact with air traffic control. At that point, no one realized the mystery was only beginning. In the days that followed, investigators discovered something extraordinary. Although MH370 had stopped communicating with air traffic control, it had not completely vanished from technology. The aircraft had continued sending automated signals to an Inmarsat satellite. These signals were known as handshakes. They were not detailed location reports, but brief electronic pings sent periodically to confirm that the aircraft's satellite communication system was still active. For investigators, these signals became the single most important clue. The pings continued for almost 6 hours after the plane disappeared from radar. 6 hours. That meant MH370 had continued flying long after its last known position. Engineers began analyzing the timing and frequency of the satellite signals using complex mathematical models. Calculations based on the Doppler effect, analysts estimated the possible distance between the aircraft and the satellite during each handshake. This analysis revealed 2 enormous arcs across the globe. One arc stretched north across Asia toward Kazakhstan and Central Asia. The other curved south into the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean. At first, investigators had no way to determine which direction the plane had taken. But further analysis of the satellite data suggested the aircraft had been moving away from the satellite, toward the southern route. This meant MH370 had likely flown deep into the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and least traveled regions on Earth. The search area suddenly expanded to millions of square kilometers. Countries across the world joined the effort. Ships from Australia, China, Malaysia, and the United States began scanning the ocean surface. Military aircraft flew long search patterns looking for debris. Satellites analyzed enormous stretches of ocean for any sign of wreckage. But the southern Indian Ocean presented enormous challenges. The region is known for violent storms, powerful winds, and huge waves. The ocean floor lies thousands of meters below the surface, making underwater searches extremely difficult. For weeks, investigators hoped floating debris would appear, but the ocean remained empty. Then, in April 2014, search vessels detected faint underwater signals that resembled the acoustic pings emitted by aircraft flight recorders. Hope surged. Ships equipped with underwater listening devices attempted to pinpoint the source of the signals. If the pings were truly coming from the aircraft's black boxes, the wreckage might finally be within reach. But when autonomous underwater vehicles searched the seabed, they found nothing. No wreckage, no aircraft. Months turned into years. The underwater search eventually covered more than 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor west of Australia. Still, MH370 remained missing. Then, more than a year after the disappearance, something unexpected happened. On July 29, 2015, a man walking along a beach on Réunion Island discovered a large piece of debris. The object looked like part of an aircraft wing. Investigators quickly confirmed it was a flaperon from a Boeing 777. Serial numbers later verified it belonged to MH370. Over the next several years, additional fragments were discovered along the coasts of Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, and South Africa. Ocean current models suggested the debris had drifted thousands of kilometers across the Indian Ocean. The discoveries confirmed something investigators had long suspected. MH370 had almost certainly ended its journey somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. Without the main wreckage or the flight recorders, investigators faced an enormous challenge. Why had the aircraft turned around? Why had its communication systems been disabled? And why had it continued flying for hours before disappearing into the ocean? Several theories emerged: mechanical failure, hijacking, deliberate action by someone in the cockpit, or a slow loss of cabin pressure that left the plane flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. But none of these explanations fully fit all the known evidence. Today, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 remains one of the greatest mysteries in modern aviation. a 200-ton aircraft carrying 239 people vanished despite an entire world of technology watching the skies. Pieces of the plane have been found. Its probable path has been estimated, but the aircraft itself still lies somewhere beneath the Indian Ocean. And until the wreckage is discovered, the final moments of MH370 remain hidden in darkness. A reminder that even in the modern world, some mysteries refuse to be solved.